What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here, PackersNews.com. No more. That's right. It's Cheesehead TV. Saturday afternoon, late in the day, the Packers have announced their initial 53-man roster after a day spent cutting down their roster from 90 to 53. Thought I'd jump on here and chat with you guys, see what's on your minds now that we've all had some time to look and kind of digest what they've done, the moves they've made. I think a couple themes coming out of today that people will be talking about probably for the next couple days. Obviously, Brian Gutekunst's not going to be precious about Ted Thompson's draft picks. He laid waste to a bunch of them today, although Kyler Fackrell remains unscathed for the time being. The outside linebacker group in particular, the linebacking core as a whole, whittled away in numbers at least. Something to always remember, and I said this on Twitter, I'll say it here, this initial 53-man roster is just that. It's the initial version. Undoubtedly, calls will be made throughout the evening. Waiver claims will be put in. Trades will be discussed. So just because guys are on the roster tonight doesn't mean they necessarily will be come Monday morning. Obviously, the waiver wire, the waiver order is set from the offseason. The Packers are right where they were in the draft. So they're at 14, 15. That doesn't change until week 4. So the Packers could have the ability to pick up a guy or two and change the bottom of the roster. Probably not too significantly, but the other thing that obviously jumps out at you is 8 wide receivers kept. We remember keeping 4 tight ends back in the day, 3 fullbacks. Those are the things Ted Thompson did throughout his tenure as general manager. Now Brian Gutekunst has his first 53 featuring 8 wide receivers. Now, both Tom Silverstein and Bob McGinn have mentioned that the Packers have been shopping Trevor Davis. I'll be very surprised if they find any takers. Usually by the time we hear about a guy being shopped, possibility is good that he's going to be released. Perhaps, maybe those talks are ongoing, and that's why they decided to keep him stashed on the roster for now. But I think there's a decent possibility he's on the way out the door. That said, fire away with your questions. You guys have already jumped in here. Someone says, please explain House and Bell to me. Well, Daniel, House is a veteran, as is Bell. They've both played a lot of games. They both started a lot of games. You can't go completely with youth. Obviously, the Packers have a lot of kind of budding talent there with Jair Alexander, Josh Jackson, Kevin King. But they also have some vets in Tramon Williams and the aforementioned Devon House. I said at the beginning of the offseason, I thought it was a good chance that House would not be on the 53-man roster. I think that may have come to fruition had Lindsey Pipkins played a little better. Clearly, they didn't think he was up to snuff and didn't think he was going to make the roster, so they traded him. After that happened, there just wasn't anybody good enough to push him off the roster. And think about it, he's not going to play much. He's going to be maybe their dime back. You can definitely expect Tramon Williams on one side, Kevin King on the other, and Jair Alexander in the slot to start. Josh Jackson will be your first guy up when they go to 4 corners. And then on the rare occasion when they need an extra defensive back and an extra corner, they go big nickel or big dime. Maybe House sees the field then. But I think he's very much just veteran insurance. And Byron Bell is the same thing. He didn't exactly light the world on fire at either guard or tackle, but they know they can get through a game with him, and they know they can kind of mask his deficiencies with some of the players around that would be around him were he thrust into action. Sorry guys, I got a lot of technology going on over here. Could the Packers have paid Mack that kind of money? Whew. They could have. It would have been completely irresponsible to do so, and it would have tied them up badly salary cap wise for the foreseeable future. That's one of the big reasons that wasn't ever going to happen. I thought Ripkowski was one of the better up-and-coming fullbacks. Well, the fullback in itself is a dying position. I said all summer I thought there was a good chance that if Carriage was healthy, he would beat him out. Turns out both of them were cut. They kept an extra tight end. You have to think those guys will be doing a lot of the work the fullback traditionally has done in McCarthy's offense. A lot of H-back stuff. I think you may see a bit less, if not a complete disappearance of, the offset eye, the I formation, and things of that nature, although maybe they'll run it a little bit. But without a true fullback on the roster, I think you're going to see a lot less of that. Do you think the Bears jumped on Mack because they sensed we were looking at dealing? No, Daniel. There were a number of teams talking to the Raiders about Mac. The Bears were one of them from the get-go, as were the Packers. I mean, it's not often that a game-changing, blue chip player comes available for trade. So a lot of teams were in on it. The Packers were one and the Bears were one. I don't think one necessarily had anything to do with the other. Fowler, yeah, a lot of people jumping on the Fowler hype train as a possibility. We'll see. I wouldn't completely dismiss the idea. As Gutekunst is fond of saying, they're in on every conversation. Speaking of which, we're going to hear from Brian Gutekunst tomorrow, which is kind of amazing, seeing as when Ted Thompson was the general manager, we wouldn't hear from him until the following spring. So having a GM actually sit up there and talk about his selections is going to be kind of amazing. What's your take on keeping Crawford and releasing Martini and Thomas? It's interesting in that Martini was running with the first special teams units, both on kickoff coverage and return, as recently as a week and a half ago. I haven't been privy to practice in the last week or so, but he started camp with the first string on teams. So I know they really liked what they got from Crawford as far as his physicality. You saw the big hit he laid on the returner in Kansas City late in that preseason game. That's what they like. Every special team unit needs a guy who's super physical, has a total disregard for human life, and is just going down there as a heat-seeking missile. And that is his MO. I don't think Thomas and Martini ever really showed anything special physically that made the Packers think they had to keep them around. So it's not that, to me, it's not that big a surprise. Keith, Earl Thomas, any shot? 0.00000000000000002%. That's my official answer. More draft picks cut. Is this cause an effect of free agent signings? Not necessarily. I think it was just how Gutekunst looked at the roster and evaluated it. I don't think it necessarily had to do with free agent signings pushing people off. I mean, you don't have to look much further than Robert Tonyan making it, an undrafted guy. But that was a position that had two guys signed in free agency, and he still made the roster. So I think a lot more. It has a lot more to do with wanting to keep, as they are, McCarthy and Gutekunst will echo this. They want to keep the best 53 football players, and I think that's how they, for the most part, went about it when designing this roster. Cole Madison update, absolutely nothing. We have absolutely no idea, have heard nada. But as soon as I know, you guys will know. Beagle gets cut, why? Jason, that's a really good question. I would have kept him over Fackrell. I think we've seen everything we're ever going to see out of Fackrell. I think the Packers keep hoping that his production on the field eventually ends up matching some of the physical testing they had on him coming out of college. As far as Beagle goes, he didn't light the world on fire, obviously, this preseason, but, I mean, after coming off of basically a redshirt year where he missed an entire offseason and coming in off of basically his first real offseason in the NFL, I am a bit surprised. I do think Gutekunst probably looks at his game and says there's no individual trait, there's no physical ability that he possesses that is in any way special or has a ceiling above what you've already seen. I think they're looking at him and they looked at him and they said, this is basically a guy who's maybe going to be able to help out a little bit on special teams, and we're never going to be able to play him from scrimmage. And there's no physical traits that you saw throughout camp or the preseason that made you think the ceiling was higher than what you've already seen. So I think they decided to move on because of that. Now, I'm of the opinion that he could have been taught technique and learned to become, if not a difference maker, so to speak, or a field tilting pass rusher, at least somebody that you could count on to make a play every now and then. Kyler Fackrell, of course, has made one or two plays throughout his career, oftentimes when things have fallen into his lap. But like I said, they love his physicality. They love his physical testing. So I think that's more than anything why he got the call over Beagle. Khalil Mack trade is not what Jordy signed up for. Nice. Rollins hurt? Yes, Glenn. He's dealing with a hamstring injury. He is on injured reserve. However, he is on the injured reserve after making the 53-man roster, which means that they can bring him back in 8 weeks if they want to. Or they could leave him on IR for the entire year. We'll see. We could also end up finding out that he has an injury designation when what do you call it? When the wire comes out, which means that they would give him an injury settlement and release him. So we'll know more about that tomorrow. Do you think they kept anyone for trade bait? Specifically, I mean, Trevor Davis being shopped and still on the roster tells you pretty much all you need to know there. I think he's definitely a guy they're looking to move. Are there any edge rushers you could see us swinging a trade for? We mentioned Fowler earlier. Nobody that leaps to mind at the moment, but I need to take a look tonight and see who got released, who the Packers might bring in that way, and see who people kept that might be available. Who would want Davis? Somebody needs a returner. The Patriots might, actually. They kind of released, they basically put their roster together today without a returner, so anything's possible. Is it easier to get players through waivers on cutdown day? It's the hardest time of the year because everybody's looking. I know it's a wash with people. You're going 90 to 53, so you know, there's certainly a lot of names to wade through from the outside. But you got to remember, these NFL teams, they've been tracking every single player in the league since basically before they came into the NFL, and they have a big, you know, board for the draft and free agency throughout the entire year. And they have pro personnel people keeping track of just that very thing. I mean, that is their entire job, to keep track of guys that may come free and project them into the Packers system and see if, you know, whether they might want to give them a call, so to speak. Surprised at Marwin Evans? I'm not, just because I know how much the Packers love Whitehead. Myself, this is another one where I would have differed. I would have kept Evans over Whitehead, but they love Whitehead's his athleticism, and they love him on special teams. So that's pretty much the writing there. You missed the crooked lamp. Hey, but I would come out here sometimes with the old gig too, so there you go. Do you see the Packers picking anyone up? I would be very, very surprised if they didn't. I tend to think there's probably you know, got to be a guy or two out there that they're looking at around the waiver wire that have been cut from another team that may be able to help. They're awfully light at inside linebacker. They're awfully light at outside linebacker. So they're, you know, those are the types of things they'll be looking at, the types of player they'll be looking at. Now, as far as specific names, we'll have to get to tomorrow, get a better handle on that. Okay, one or two more here, people. Why did they go with only 2 running backs? Well, Devontae Mays has been hurt, so he's on injured reserve. He probably will get some kind of injury settlement. Aaron Jones is suspended. And again, the rest of the guys, there's nothing special there. There's no real upside to keeping them. You're not going to play them. And if injury were to strike one of those first 2 weeks, you know, you're going to see creative use of Randall Cobb in the backfield. I just don't think they're really worried about it. And you got to remember, they still have yet to set their practice squad. 1 or 2 of those guys could end up there. And if injury were to strike, and say in week 1, and they needed to pick somebody up in week 2, I'm pretty sure 1 or 2 of those guys will still be available, and they'll know the system, and they can basically pop them right back in. Herb Waters finally will show his ability. We'll see. I would be surprised if we saw a whole lot of him, especially early in the season. But perhaps, you know, injuries always strike, and you know, these guys are always called upon at some point. So I think, like I said, I don't think it'll happen early, but I think you'll see him as the year goes on. PBR Net Cup. No, it's Michelob. All right, everybody. I'm going to jump and have some more of those. Thanks so much for coming on late Saturday. You know, you guys could be doing a million other things, yet here you are chatting Packers. That's why we do it. You guys are amazing. Make sure you're checking Cheesehead TV for all the latest. We have everything broken down for you tomorrow. You know, anything having to do with the Packers. Make sure you're checking that out. Make sure you're checking out the Facebook page, the YouTube channel, the website, cheeseheadtv.com. Subscribe. Check it all out. Thanks a lot, everyone. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a good night.